it's not just about audio anymore, as these systems become even more integrated into the vehicles. This is the influence and impact of the car audio industry, presented by Powerbase.
So now we're really getting into kind of the crazy, wild, years of car audio. The Pimp My Rides, the wild systems, the TVs everywhere, and then obviously transitioning into kind of the more quality or the OEM integrations, and the stuff we kind of have now. But first, we want to definitely, give a shout out and a thanks to Powerbase for helping us out and sponsoring these episodes on car audio history. Some of the people at their company have huge influence and huge history within the car audio world, and them as well, obviously, as a company. They've kind of expanded a lot into the power sports, side-by-sides and marine stuff, but also the OEM direct fit applications, where you can just basically, newer car, just take out, unplug the factory speakers, plug in and screw in the, their upgraded speakers and have a nice sound system.
Well, and I think that's the current state.
It's very
of car audio.
Yeah, that's very similar, especially if you're looking at something, like an EV or like a Tesla,
right,
or some of the newer Fords, where you might not be able to upgrade the head unit at all.
Right.
Really, because it's fully integrated screen. You're also controlling all of your,
your climate control,
your
stuff.
seats.
Yeah,
There's a lot involved in it,
yeah.
And we'll get into some of the companies that are working with that,
right,
as well. But for the most part, you're having to maybe piggyback if you're adding an amplifier. Right. You're more or less kind of just not restricted to, but you're probably getting your best out of it by just replacing the factory speakers with an upgraded option. And with Powerbase, they have, full line of those OEM direct fit. Mm-hmm. And what's pretty cool, like I said, they've been helping us out with this. If you go online, powerbaseusa.com, use the code AutoRev24 and you can get 10% off of that. So nice. Powerbase, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's kind of, let's go back in time 20 years to the crazy car audio.
And I think that's what's set up, like I just mentioned, people now are still looking to upgrade their stereo experience in their car because of what we're going to talk about right now.
It became a lot more open and wide to the masses.
Right.
Wasn't necessarily just, a car show, just a car audio competition,
right,
or your audio files and stuff like that, where, there was a lot of things going on in the industry, in the world, in entertainment that kind of made your soccer mom in a Escalade or a Suburban want to put a little stereo in there, want to put some TV screens for the kids in the back. So it became more mainstream, around this time.
And it's because of, again, the recipe of technology. Yeah. Technology was growing, and then even like you mentioned, the size of the car was there. So these soccer moms with these SUVs, all of a sudden, you try to put a TV in a standard cab, short bed, mini truck, and all of a sudden it's taking up a lot of real estate.
Or you're just at that time too, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had, with DVD player, you had just a single DIN flip out with a 7-inch screen, and that was good for, like I said, like a small truck or a small car. You go SUV, you got the kids in the back, even kids in the backpack.
Right.
So a lot of people started putting a flip down, DVD player screen or headrest monitors in the back. And of course that leads to, well, how many TVs can I put in there?
Right. Because if one fits, that means 25 fit.
Exactly. But yeah, technology was definitely improving. It was advancing. 2001 was, Apple iTunes,
right.
Apple iPod came out.
Yeah.
Of course, even before that was when, and that's usually it's always the underground guys that are advancing technologies, in my opinion. But like your Napsters, your places where you could download MP3s, essentially pirated at that time, but that was late 90s,
right?
For that, and then obviously iTunes came out where you could legally buy the stuff. The iPad, now you can plug it in, boom, hook it up. Now you had a few hundred songs right there,
right?
Compared
to your Sony jukebox. I remember at the time, Sony made a 50 CD changer. They called it the jukebox. And
because I'd say your 6 CD changer or something like that was probably your common one.
Yeah.
And that, let's say on average 12, songs, let's say on a CD. So you're talking 40, 50, 60 CD songs
right.
that you had to select from.
Right.
Well, now you had, 10 times that.
Well, I'm looking at if you're the guy that wasn't pirating music and actually buying the CD from the artist at the time for $18.99 times 50, right? I mean, you had like a collection. You had some money involved in just having music stored in your car.
Well, and even then, I remember having like the visor, on your visor, the CD holder on the visor, you had like,
or your zip out CD library.
Had one of those too.
Yeah. I mean,
half of those CDs were burned, pirated MP3 CDs.
Right.
Because that was also a thing too, where, you had CD players that were being fairly common in these cars. Some of them still had a tape deck.
Right.
But you also started to get like your Discman would have could play MP3s from a CD, a burned CDR.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which is like a mixtape.
And then even, a couple years later into it, you had head units where you could play MP3s off a CD.
Yeah.
A little bit later on, USB,
That's
flash drive. Even I remember too, like an SD card or something like that. So it was all digital music.
Yeah.
That could be stored and just basically how it'd be played. That really opened it up a lot more to the masses because just popularity and getting it. But the quality level of the sound wasn't there necessarily, because of the compression, and even still today, it's still music you're streaming is still heavily compressed, and it's gone away from that now,
right?
But a lot of the audiophiles, a lot of the competition guys still stuck with CDs,
right?
Even like when we were researching this, like the, some of the associations were like, hey, 2017 CD mix, and it's like, I think in 2017 is when I stopped having anything that could play a CD.
Yeah.
But for that quality, it still stuck to, the CDs.
Yeah, and you got to look at technology again for that. Because what I love about the car audio industry forced music to remaster their tapes. So what was known as the like holy grail of this, tape material all of a sudden turned into, if we don't have digital recording, I can't play this in my car.
Yeah. Well, and you look at even just an example, you go on Spotify or something like that, and you look at some older artists, a lot of them will have an album as like 2005 remastered, 2008 remastered, and that's, people started going back through and
look at the library. And,
remastering it for digital, for the higher quality, for the higher bit rate and bits, and so the quality level of sound was starting to come back up. But I think at that time in the early 2000s, your car audio shops were probably maybe more focused on what's the craziest setup we can do.
Oh, of course.
How many subwoofers can we fit in X?
Right.
How many, 3-4-way component speakers on a door? How many TV screens?
Well, and even and the TV screens went from 5-inch to 47-inch. Like there was
you're putting full TV LCD, screens in there, because of the technology, the flat screens. Because you look at old TVs in some stuff from the 80s, it was your small
little tube TV,
tube TV. Yeah. Then obviously as computer monitors and TVs got better quality, I remember seeing small little monitors in headlights at shows. We had a couple friends that, Courtney Howell, the Street Trucks guys had a Nissan Titan where they molded
the tailgate
TVs into the tailgate handle.
Yeah.
And, it was funny. And this was, 2009, 2010, a little bit later in the kind of the peak of that. I remember seeing a picture recently. Tim Donaldson used to work at Extensive, has his own shop now.
Yeah.
He had a truck colorblind, which was wild, innovative, just everything you could do, suicide doors, full chassis, all that, and huge sound system that replaced the entire back seat. That was a big thing too, like in a truck.
Yeah.
Just take out the whole back seat.
Right.
Don't put a box, under the seat, or, like you could raise the rear seat up an inch or two to fit, a little bit bigger box. A lot of people were doing that, but no, just take the seat out, put as many stereo, subwoofers back there. But he had probably 32-inch screens in every door.
Right.
And then you had angled screens on the top. You had stuff like in the dash. You had just kind of
just crazy
everywhere,
excess everywhere. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at those cars now and I think back to the time, and I can just think of Transformers. Like how everything.
Well, that was also the Lambo door era.
Exactly. Like you wanted the car to almost explode out, and linear actuators would raise and lower TVs, or you have neon that was introduced in a lot of things. So the music itself or the installation also became part of the theme of the car. So the guy that had the wall of woofers in the back seat, well, he made sure that they were all color coordinated, that they lit up, that it was just more than just the music. It was more like, here's what I can do.
Well, that's the entertainment stuff.
Right.
It's and that's you talk about your audio shops that maybe were installing antennas and head units or tape decks or whatever.
Yeah.
To then speaker systems to then TVs and navigation and alarms and neon underglow and now LEDs. So it's basically anything audio electronics.
Sure.
And there was several car shows, Spring Break Nationals, your Hot Important Nights that catered a lot to the car entertainment, side of it, stuff like that. But I think the big thing that went crazy and brought it to the masses was Pimp My Ride.
Yeah, I agree.
And that came out 2004.
Right.
And of course, who's the host? A rapper, Exhibit. So obviously you're gonna
put music in the car.
Key and look at music. So the guys at West Coast Customs were putting these putting big systems and TVs and a lot of celebrity rides and Hummers and stuff like that for Shaq. And, obviously Pimp My Ride was Pimp My Ride. Right. So it was over the top
all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing too that we haven't touched on a lot is, again, technology streamlining everything. So you remember in the 80s and the 70s and 80s, you took an amp, 1,000-watt amp was, this big and thick and weighed 40, 50 pounds, right? Because it needed that much power.
Yeah.
Right? You needed to have those capacitors and everything.
The capacitors and all that, took some size, and in order to make that power, you kind of almost had to go for size.
Exactly.
But then same with computers of an entire room at NASA to
your phone,
to a watch.
Right.
And same kind of a thing.
And that's what happened. Like inverter technology came out. That's even a big thing for the welding industry, where something that's required a lot of amperage that can only work on small voltage. Well, that's what an inverter does. So that's where we started to see where the amp size went from this to this.
Yeah.
Right. And then also too, even woofers went from a big giant box that someone made with like a skill saw or like a table saw into a molded box that fit the contours of your floor, but had the proper cubic space for that woofer. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, even the whole deal, shallow mount woofers. I mean, for a long time it was a woofer. It was a full woofer. Well, then figuring out with technology, just figuring out how to make it a smaller package to fit bigger subs, more power in smaller places under seats and stuff like that.
Yeah. And music taste changed too.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden the big carrying bass wasn't the thing, that people wanted more of a clean sounding system where I want to be able to hear the background noise. I don't want to just hear this bass.
Well, you want to hear all the notes you want to hear. And also too, I think that's, in the 2000s, the popularity of music really expanded where, you had your pop, you had your rock, you had your rap, you had your whatever it was, but all of those genres were popular.
Yes.
So you had a wide variety of what people were maybe listening to.
Right.
So, a lot of companies were catering towards that.
Right. And obviously we know a lot of our rap artists, they integrate their car or their car audio into their song lyrics.
Yeah.
We've heard Ice Cube, we've heard Eazy-E.
We mentioned that with the Alpine deck and all that stuff,
but even too, like at that time, you look at
Outkast. Yeah, that was 2003. So that was right at the same time Pimp My Ride was popular.
Right.
And they were talking about that 808 in the bass and what was it?
The midgets in the trunk wrestling.
Yeah.
Making that tag rattle.
Making that tag.
Making that license plate. Yeah. That's a big deal.
What's funny is I remember specifically, and this was later on, but being down in Florida, at a car show, at truck shows and stuff like that. And that was when the donks were becoming very big and popular. And I remembered seeing bolts being welded to the inside of the trunk.
Okay.
With washers stacked on them loosely. so that there would be more rattling.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Come on.
And that's the thing. Like we've always looked at like want to do everything to get rid of the rattle because we want to hear the music, hear the sound and all that. And so that, companies like Dynamat, and other sound deadening companies had come out to try to deaden the road noise outside so you could hear the music better.
Right.
But then also just tighten everything up so that everything sounded better.
Right.
And then you had a lot of guys that
they
were doing the complete opposite, basically trying to make it sound like a worse installation.
Right.
Because they thought that that's what, that was getting the attention. And like, oh, you got a couple 12s in your trunk, but, you've got...
Is it rattling the car apart?
But all these washers are rattling, so it sounds like it's
pulling the car apart. Yeah.
So like I said, like anything, like with the Pimp My Ride, things go kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But at that time, it really did come available a lot more to the masses.
Right.
Where people are doing aftermarket stereos and stuff like that. You started to see some of these brands that were your boutique brands or your higher end car audio being available at Circuit City, at Best Buy, and they had their installation bays in the back where
the car audio guys,
right? And I think too a lot of the
sound rooms you'd walk into and you'd like you
could mess with the head units,
right.
So it's just larger scale national chain versions of your local stereo shop basically,
right?
And I know that kind of got some people or got some companies in trouble or mixed with because then you're taking high-end names, higher-end sounds, trying to sell it to mass market, sell it at a huge discount rate because of, the chain, and then just maybe not always kind of working out for them.
Yeah. Plus, too, I mean, it diluted a lot of the brands that were the boutique guys because, all of a sudden now, if you can get Kenwood, Alpine, Harman Kardon, or, Boston Acoustics in any of your normal cars, well, then all of a sudden that's not very cool anymore to have in your full-on show
and
car.
At that time, so then there were several companies that were your even higher boutique that kind of stayed that. So it kind of there's a little bit of that transition too.
Right.
Some of those higher end brands that were,
who sold out and who didn't. Right.
I mean, essentially that, and sometimes maybe that came with then, okay, well, their quality's better because they're not in Best Buy.
Right.
But maybe it's not the case. So a lot of that started happening, and a lot of that, on the OEM side of it, they were, obviously integrating with more, technology, integrating with better sound quality, and partnering with a lot of these, with Pioneer, with Sony, with, JBL, Bose, JL Audio, to get that a little bit better engineered sound into the as an upgrade package.
Right.
And so then it kind of then became tougher for some of the car audio companies to either compete with that, or one up that with their own stuff because it kind of turned into such an integrated system, with steering wheel controls, with built-in amplifiers where you had to kind of run adapters to work with OEM stuff or bypass it completely.
Right.
So some of the car auto companies then maybe switched a little bit more towards like making a head unit. Making a touchscreen head unit that had GPS navigation. Had with a DVD, had all that stuff that your OEM Chevy truck maybe still had a tape deck and a CD player in there.
Right.
They weren't. So that was kind of like how can we've made this monster and we've helped the OEMs. And now what do we do to kind of still improve and upgrade on these systems that we helped create, basically?
Well, around the mid-90s, the idea of marrying a computer with an audio-controlled unit became a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, now we call it sync or we call it...
Yeah, there's different brands that, Toyota has Entune.
Right.
Stuff like that.
But that was like, at the time, that was a new thing because it was like, well, why not? We're doing all of these things that are computer generated. Why can't we actually compute in a car? I want to say that sync was probably your first hit that actually happened, but there was another company that actually tried it out. that, well, again, we're going to bring up Richco again. But, he was working with a couple companies to create a system called Joyride. And Joyride was supposed to be your PC, and I say PC like
just personal computer.
Personal computer.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be like where you would have a PC in your car to be an assistant. So you could look up Google and find directions. You could have an integration system that would tell you where to drive to next, that kind of stuff. Whereas before that wasn't thought about. We were still in Thomas books and still looking at things.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even just, or I remember having I think a Pioneer, and this was in probably 2006, had like a Pioneer navigation aftermarket system that ran off of a DVD.
Right.
And you had like 6 DVDs depending on where in the country you were.
Yes.
And then some, like maybe it was an SD card that you do, whatever. But you also remember, like, none of those had internet connections.
No. Right.
So it was like looking at your Thomas guide, but on the screen.
But just on the screen. Yeah.
I remember like driving somewhere and the freeway had just been completed in the last couple of years, and it's telling me to turn left.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm on the freeway right now. Because it didn't know that a freeway was there anymore.
Yeah, because there wasn't an upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's, you'd have to maybe pay $100 every once in a while to get a new upgrade.
Like a subscription that they would send you updated. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But, that was stuff, again, very early, and we take that for granted now. I mean, I know I'm walking around with a phone in my pocket that does everything we're talking about. But, I mean, let's just look back even just 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I know the meme running around that we're all MapQuest looking like pirates, driving around. But that was to combat that. That was the whole why do you need a map book? You should have it into your head unit, and it should be integrated into your car.
Yeah. No, and that's what it took, the technology, and took the people to kind of get to that point. At that time period, like we're saying, the more digital music or streaming came a little bit later, but your digital music coming into play. So, and just the technologies, like, radio was, okay, well, who's going to listen to the radio anymore when I can listen to any song I want to almost right now? So HD radio came out, where it was better quality streaming. Yeah. Or better quality radio.
Right.
You look, then like the, car company would integrate an aux cord. Oh yeah. Which it's kind of funny too, of that being a thing in the vernacular or in songs and music and stuff, like, hey, pass me the aux.
Right.
I want to be the DJ. I want to control what we're listening to.
Yeah.
But it kind of, the technology kind of like almost imploded itself a little bit with,
I was just going to say that,
the car audio, because, you're getting all these features, all of these things coming from the factory.
Right.
And, then talk 2008, the recession hit, like, okay, well, who cares about having all of that crazy stuff? Because also too, like, at the same time, police, we talked about theft being a thing that kind of went from making people have crazy sound systems with visible subs and speakers to hiding it away.
Right.
The police in the early 2000s really started to clamp down on, loud car stereos and stuff like that. And, to the fact in 2002, the Department of Justice created guidelines.
What?
To not laws necessarily, but guidelines for law enforcement on how to deal with and approach and ticket or on car stereos. So is it, okay, this is a noise violation.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, you don't have a noise restriction or curfew till 10 o'clock in your city. So then how is that a thing? But it's disturbing the peace, or, all those kinds of things. So that really kind of just slowly started to change the car audio industry, and maybe going from those, how many TVs can I put in, how many subwoofers can I put in, to kind of more, what's the best quality that I can get?
Right.
What's the integration that I can do? What can I control? Like, what's the technology? How can I integrate my phone to work with this system? And that's kind of was really a big transition point for the industry. Well,
now I'm going to say this, because I think the swan song of the big, let's say, excessive stereo systems, or cars that were kind of themed around a stereo system.
Yeah.
I think that the last efforts that Alpine had in the mid 2000s, they built a series of, I want to say 3 cars.
There was 3 or 4, and some of them are a lot crazier than the others.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the first was like the Mini Cooper.
That's the one I remember directly. That was a center seat, center steer.
Yeah,
Mini Cooper,
kind of Roadster, whatever.
Yeah.
Blue painted ocean. Kind of stuff. They had a BMW that was like paying tribute to some singers and rappers.
Yes.
Probably the crazier one that definitely I remember was Imprint.
Yeah.
So that was a Mercedes. That everything was completely done and changed on it and turned into a center steer.
Yeah.
Turned into, this and that. And they were just full attention getters.
Right.
Because this was like peak car audio.
Yep.
I remember at this time in 2005, 2006, I worked at Audiobahn.
Okay.
And we had 7 booths at CES.
Yeah.
3 booths at SEMA.
Right.
Just for one company.
Right.
And so it was
one booth's
huge
not enough?
industry.
Yeah.
No, but that's what I'm saying is
know,
like, because there were 7 brands.
Yeah.
Of different little niche, markets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, and it's Audiobahn definitely, that brand for them captured the excess and the crazy stuff. Their amplifiers were chrome metal with flame 3D, and same with their subwoofers were, had chrome flame, designs in them, and a lot of people would turn those upside down and reverse
so they could
mount
sure
them
that,
to show the basket and stuff off, versus like, hey, we're building a ported box and it's got to be this quality and this sound. It's like, no, now you're going, opposite, but you're just trying to show it off.
You're trying to show it,
yeah,
pretty much.
But yeah, the Alpine stuff was pretty crazy, and I remember seeing some of it on TV. I think it was on the Rides show and Rides program.
Right.
And the guys that were working on a lot of those they're definitely industry legends.
Oh yeah.
In their own right, and now more so, but they were young kids in their 20s essentially.
Exactly.
So it's kind of the same thing as like the guys in the 80s. That were the young kids, working on it. So if you're still rocking your stock stereo system, you need some help. And you need to go to Powerbase and check out their OEM direct fit line of speakers. Basically a plug and play operation on any newer Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Nissan, you name it. And I actually got a full set in my Toyota 4Runner. It sounds amazing, especially considering you're basically just replacing the factory speakers. So go check them out at powerbaseusa.com. Use the code AUTOREV24 and you can get 10% off anything on the site, including these cool little Bluetooth speakers. This one right here is the Sound Cube. Clip it on your backpack, take it down to the beach. And what's really cool is this split speaker. So you can put one in the kitchen, one in the backyard at a party. Everyone's having a good time listening to the same music. Basically got like full stereo, almost surround sound system in this little package. So if you use the code AUTOREV24, you can get 10% off. So go check them out and take a listen. So you've been following along on Auto Revolution, you know that we're a big fan of Chevy OBS trucks. And Beltec Suspension has been around for 40 years, and they were one of the first innovators of the sport truck movement back in the 80s. And we've been lucky with them to partner on a few different projects, from the OBS Clash documentary series to the Tahoe Unlimited, and even a few things we've got up our sleeves coming out later this year. What's really cool is they've partnered with us to offer free shipping if you use the code AutoRevolution24 at beltec.com. So whether it's a lowering kit on your Chevy or a lift kit on your Bronco or your Jeep, and if you use the code AutoRevolution24 at beltec.com, you're going to get free shipping. Now back to the show.
Okay, so another company that really made a lot of noise back then, Rockford Fosgate.
Mm-hmm.
They for many, many years had a lot of different vehicles that were on display. They had their whole Punch series line of amplifiers. That was a super big deal for Fosgate. But Fosgate also, too, they were another company that bridged in. They started in the 80s.
Yeah, they've been around. Jim Fosgate, they've been around for a number of years and kind of really ramped up during that time period as well. Right.
And that was kind of another thing. If you look at the masses, you look at the Mount Rushmores up there, you got a Fosgate up there too as well. You definitely going to have your Alpine, your Kicker, and Fosgate. Those were kind of the big ones. Can't forget about Kenwood, I guess, but those.
No, I mean, but there's a lot of the car audio companies that maybe, just for a lack of term, especially we're talking about music, they sold out, or they advanced into a certain genre of the market. Yeah. And where you're OEM, you're this and that. And there were several companies that still kind of obviously got very big, but still had that a little bit of that stereo installer, car audio shop kind of guy
Right.
as like their fan,
Yeah.
and that's, Fosgate was, one of those. They're still going out to a lot of the shows. I remember them bringing out like like the bass chamber,
Right.
like the van, and you go sit in it and just
That's when you see all the girls with their hair,
all the hair,
fly,
getting all the static and
Right.
getting
Yeah.
crazy, and you're walking out of there kind of nauseous,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all that stuff, and so there was a lot of companies that were kind of going that route, but a lot of that was, especially like we said with the Alpine, those kind of crazy car builds, that was the attention getter.
Right.
It, if the 90s was a lot of it about the, DBs and the bass, booming and all of that. Well, I'd say like the 2000s, early 2000s for the show stuff came more maybe the creativity,
Yeah.
the sound quality.
Yes.
How can we make this really nice box? Because I know even from talking to Eric, at Powerbase and stuff, and at that time I think he was at like MA Audio or Memphis Car Audio.
Yeah.
He was saying a lot of the DB guys it was kind of taking away from the show quality aspect of it.
Right.
Where it came just about how do I get that number? How do I get that, bass? Because, we mentioned about 180 being, hit, with one of the vehicles that Eric was involved with, but it was 2001 when they broke 170.
Right.
It was 2005, Pioneer went 177.
Yeah.
And it's only in the last few years where they've gone to like 186, 187 on the DB mark.
Right.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So that kind of essentially could plateau and became so much about science, so much about, making it work, that the beauty of it or the creativity on how it looked kind of went away.
Right. Exactly.
But that then got picked up by a lot of these, different companies and stuff like that.
Well, another thing that I want to point out too is also vehicles changed. Like Fosgate made a motorcycle stereo system. All of a sudden now
For the Harley baggers. I mean,
right.
You could put a subwoofer on a bike. You could put,
actual
system
on the
like
front,
that.
and that became super popular. Boats.
Yeah.
Whereas a boat before, you kind of would follow the stereo guys of the time, like where you'd put maybe woofers underneath the deck or something like that. But with the advancement of like towers,
for the wakeboarding,
for the wakeboarders, now you got wet sounds that are up there that are bolted to the top of the tower. So even the guy that's behind the rope on a wakeboard, he can hear the stereo.
Yeah. Or you're out at the river,
Or you're just out of the river.
The girls down there can hear the stereo.
Well, and that's another thing too. I mean, look, we look at those Alpine cars, and the thing that the purists hated those Alpine cars because they were convertible, so the sound quality was zero.
Yeah.
If you really kind of look at it, it's
you're
just
not
like
gonna get the same.
you're not going to get the same as being an enclosed car. Boats are the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't have a roof for a boat.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the other thing.
So you had to make something that was.
You had to make that was enclosed that could withstand,
and waterproof.
Waterproof,
Yeah.
Right? So that was another thing that the advancement of this stuff, they had to evolve.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's the thing too. You're talking about the technology of where, and this is where things start being integrated more or being included, where you have backup cameras that eventually then become standard.
Yes.
And now you have multiple cameras kind of all over.
Right.
You've got stuff like your Sirius XM.
This is true.
Satellite radio that came in the early 2000s and then became kind of standard on
subscription
like GM
radio.
vehicles.
Yeah. Right.
And so that was where it was, more options, better quality,
right.
Different thing. Of course, you go under a overpass
and you're screwed
too long, or you're cutting it out and stuff. But all of that stuff really started to happen. Later on in the 2000s, you were getting, obviously you had your GPS integrations, but people started to, like Pioneer started when the iPhone came out, in 2011, Pioneer came out with the app radio.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't like, it's kind of like precursor to CarPlay.
I was just going to say
and
that,
Android Auto, where it wasn't necessary, basically it was kind of an app, like someone had to create, or modify their app on the phone that then had a separate app on
to play the
thing
head unit,
that would
right.
then be able to communicate and kind of
Yeah.
work with each other. So it wasn't there yet. It was a bridge, but
Right.
it was just showing where kind of things were going. But I think too, like, you know, you're saying like the dashes got bigger,
Right.
You know, it became standard for like a double din,
Yeah.
you know, 6-inch, 7-inch touch screen,
Right.
in the car. Whereas before it was, you know, your single din,
Yeah.
because you're, you know, using a CD,
Right.
or a tape, something like that,
Or it just fit the chassis of the car.
and that's what it
another
would fit.
one. Yeah,
you know,
right.
so it was,
Right.
you know, whereas now it became normal to have something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Obviously, when smartphones, you know, iPhones, all that stuff become more popular, you know, obviously a lot of places, you know, here in the States and I don't know where else, but had hands-free laws.
Yeah.
So you couldn't be on your phone, you know, having it. So it had to be either a part of your radio,
Right.
or like, you know,
You had to install a
install
Bluetooth.
a Bluetooth, you know, deal or something like that. So yeah, a lot of the car stereo shops then would, you know, aftermarket fit, you know, some of these Bluetooth, you know, communications deal for that. But then that technology then of course got used to, okay, now I can stream my audio
Right.
from my phone,
Right.
to it. You know, the connection for your iPod or your iPhone went from, you know, kind of an audio connection or an aux cable to
A charging point.
something that's
yeah.
it's a charging point, but then it was a digital
Yeah.
transfer of the audio, so the audio quality could get, you know, even better. And, you know, eventually now there's, you know, lossless, you know, FLAC compression, you know, where it's just way better quality than
Yeah.
an MP3,
Right.
even for streaming.
Yeah.
So that technology has all advanced. But I think, you know, if you look at the last 15 years, you know, and especially since the recession of it's, you're hard pressed unless they're doing it for now a nostalgia reason to find someone with multiple 12s and 15s
Right.
and crazy, you know, head unit. But, you know, you look at stuff that, you know, guys like MTI, you know, Chris Pate, you know, was doing even back then,
Yeah.
where it was just nice, clean sound quality systems to now, you know, 3D printing and
Yes.
crazy interiors. But, you know, looking at like the tone down, the quality level, and then how can it integrate with your OEM, you know, function is kind of really where it started to spring back, I guess you could say, from those years of the recession.
We're in a magical time to live as far as car audio and restoration of vehicles, because
too.
you have all of the greatest engineering and electronics in the world here, but now we have things like 3D printers. We have computers that can map out, you know, installations before a guy even does it. Whereas before you might have a guy with a tape measure and, you know, trying out some things with some fiberglass, and we're putting it in the car. Now we're looking at this we're getting the information from the manufacturer. We're looking at how much cubic space we have in the vehicle. How can we utilize that? How is this system going to integrate into the interior? Are we going to see any of the components? You know, how is the sound quality going to be? We can all map that out now, right? So let's get bigger. That's the way I look at it. And that's why we're starting to see classical interiors in these vehicles that you wouldn't even think that would have, you know, a couple $100,000 into the interior.
Well, and that's, I mean, you go to basics, you know, there's a company like Retro Sounds and stuff like that, where you can basically have what looks like your old 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, stereo,
Right.
Not a head unit or anything, but your stereo basically.
Yeah.
But it has Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Has a USB port, you
Right.
know, charging.
Has an RCA.
Has all your preamps and your outputs and stuff to integrate into, you know, with a stereo and an amp.
Right.
You know, you've got, I remember when we were just over at Powerbase and they're like, oh yeah, here's our 6,000 watt amplifier. And then, oh yeah, here's our 500 watt amplifier. So you can throw that in the glove box or something on a truck from the 60s or whatever. Have something that looks old. You're not seeing anything. You're maybe hiding, you know, stuff. So you got a nice stereo system.
Yeah.
But it still maybe looks, you know, like an old car or old truck. Or you can go all out and build a full custom interior and integrate all these different things. I know, you know, seeing like Kicker and a lot of these different companies like CES and SEMA, a lot of them have gone to showing off classic vehicles.
Right.
Because they can show more of their product off, whereas maybe you wouldn't, and then maybe it's like the OEM integration or the mild stuff for like a newer car.
Sure.
So it's kind of a little bit of the opposite of maybe what it used to be years ago, where, hey, it's a brand new car and we're just going to put all this stuff in it.
But honestly, think about this. Let's say I drove a brand new Tesla.
Yeah.
And I had a big system in it. And if I drove down the road and you're sitting by the street and you just see a Tesla go by, you don't look at it twice because you've already seen 15 of them in the last 5 minutes, right? But if you're driving a 69 Camaro with a big system in it and it's making noise, that's something you're going to look at.
Yeah, you're getting that attention.
Right? So I think those companies are looking more to that. Like they want the attention of, hey, look, guys, we make this product. So you just can't pull up with a Toyota Camry with a booming system and it's not going to get the same results.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's good to know that those companies are still looking at that. Because, every reason right now points to factory integration, factory upgrade. Mm-hmm. And that's what, a company like Powerbase, they do an amazing job with that. They do such a good job that they even have upgrades for other vehicles that are not even intended for, city use. They're like their UTV programs with all of the bars
the
and
Can-Ams, the side-by-sides. Yeah, you got a full... And it's the same kind of thing like we were mentioning with the marine applications, the boats and stuff you got for your power sports, if you will.
Yeah.
Whether that's a motorcycle, your UTV, your side-by-side, stuff like that, you've got your sound bar.
Yeah.
That look basically kind of similar like your home theater sound bar, but it's all waterproof and a lot more heavy duty.
Yeah.
Or your speaker pods for like your marine stuff.
Right.
So you can put car audio basically, and so that's, it's mobile audio now.
Right.
Into kind of a little bit of everything. And we're also seeing, like, let's say on like the Jeep side,
sure,
that has a lot of the OEM integration, with like a head unit, but like, you got to look at the Jeeps and Broncos and all that stuff. Like, okay, maybe you also have lights.
Yeah.
You have lockers.
Right.
You've got multiple accessories, that now, like, a company like Stinger Off-Road and stuff, like their height head unit, you can put it into a Jeep. It integrates with all the factory Jeep components, everything like that.
Right.
And it also plug into your cam system or your OBD2, and you can control and monitor your tire pressures.
Yes.
You can control your lighting. You can control multiple accessories all from your head unit.
Right.
And that's something that's basically beyond just listening to music.
Yeah.
It's becoming a control center, for that. And we mentioned the Tesla and the EV stuff where you're kind of can't mess too much with that head unit, if you will.
Right.
Because it's
the
their software,
it's
their
the operating
factory,
system of the car too.
It operates the entire car.
Right.
But you can, replace all of the speakers and make it work factory OEM, in with that and get you a better sound quality.
Sure.
You can do, and it's kind of funny, like exhaust sounds.
Oh God, for an electric car?
No, I know. I mean, that's not all of our favorite things, but
right.
Company, Borla, for example, they came out. They're an exhaust company.
Yeah, sure.
So they've made their back on what
sound.
A car sounds like.
Yes.
Well, now in an EV, it just sounds like a hovercraft.
Right.
So they've made where it, and of course we know some inside information. Hopefully, there's no NDA on this, so I won't maybe mention the exact company, but that system was actually made by a aftermarket car audio company.
Yes.
So that then it could, tie into your RPM on your.
Because that makes sense.
Is there RPM in an electric vehicle?
Well,
there is.
It has to move.
Revolutions of motors.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
And revolution per motor maybe is what they.
That's what it is for that one. Yeah.
But so it would. The sound would match your speed, your RPM, what you were doing, so it didn't just sound like.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it's idling. We got 50 miles an hour.
We got a lumpy cam going, and you're on the freeway. Something like that.
Yeah.
And they've also, a lot of the OEMs and companies have integrated active noise control.
Right.
Where you have your car, whether it's an EV, a regular, kind of car, and like same with your phone, where it's got the microphone, pick up all the ambient road noise,
right,
and then it cancels that frequency out and pumps that into your your interior through your car stereo.
Yeah.
To basically noise cancel
right.
while you're driving.
I got a great story about that. My daughter,
how it might be a little bit weird and kind of uncomforting. Yeah.
Well, years ago when my daughter was young, we got into, our Tahoe, and I didn't know that this feature was a feature at the time, but I got on the freeway and the music went up.
Well, that's been around for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the first time hearing that, and I'm looking over at my daughter, and I'm like, "Oh, why are you playing with the radio?"
Yeah.
Right. And she's like, "I didn't play with the radio." I'm like, "Well, who turned up the radio?" Right. Like, I didn't know that feature existed.
Yeah.
But and then, of course, when I slowed down, when getting off the freeway, the music went down.
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Oh, wait a second." I thought that was the greatest thing in the world, and my daughter looked at me like, "So what, Dad? It's technology." Like, welcome.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I remember turning it off on my
me too.
Truck when I had it, because it would kind of get
it gets annoying.
It would get annoying because
when you're in traffic.
You're in traffic, it would do that, or it would jump up to me. You're like, you know what? I'll do it. And that's the thing. I still do that when I get on the freeway, and luckily you got your steering wheel controls and stuff where it's a lot easier. And get on the freeway and go boop boop. Pop it up a little. I'm getting off the on ramp.
Yeah, boop, boop. Yep.
Go down a little bit
And I remember that's back when we could talk on the phone and drive, because we were all still able bodies. Now it's a different story. But that was the other thing too. I couldn't stand the fact that let me turn it down, because I'm on the phone.
Because it wasn't connected to your stereo. Whereas now it's going through it, so it mutes it. It pauses the song for you. It does all that nice stuff.
Yeah. We used to have to multitask, drive, talk, and move a radio.
Or you had your kid.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, turn
DJ.
it down. Yeah. So. The passenger that was always controlling that stuff. But and actually that brings something up. So we're gonna backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
The era when we were putting TV screens kind of into everything, and then iPhones and iPods coming out and stuff like that. And like I remember too, back then you had your double din or your flip out, but because of safety, DOT, you couldn't watch a movie while you were driving.
That's right.
You had to have the e-brake on.
Yes.
So of course people would bypass it, make a little switch.
Right.
Or even like a little like resistor or something that would trick it into thinking that the e-brake's pressed.
Right.
I remember 2011, we were doing my crew cab truck for SEMA.
Sure.
And did a iPad.
Right.
Molded.
Was that 2011?
So that was 2011.
Wow, I thought it was earlier than that.
When we did. Well, it might have been late. I know 2011 was when I had the truck at SEMA.
Okay.
When it was painted.
Okay.
It might have been before that, because 2010 is when the iPad came out.
I know.
So it was 2010 when the iPad came out. There was a guy. There was a shop in like the L.A. Valley area, Santa Clarita, San Gabriel, something like that.
Okay.
Called Soundman.
Okay.
And he had started in the 70s, but then his son took over the business basically. And
Sure.
The younger guy being more hip to technology, so he came out with and did the very first integrated iPad, into the dash.
Sure.
We ended up doing it on the center console.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to kind of keep, I didn't want to go too crazy because you had a fiberglass and integrate into the dash bezel, and didn't want to go too crazy. So we still had like that Pioneer, double din that I said that had the app connect.
Yeah, that's right.
App radio on it, but then I wanted to be able to pull up. I mean, I don't even know if Netflix or YouTube at the time, but you could download movies from iTunes.
Movies. Yeah.
So like I wanted to do that.
Right.
Wanted to sync it. Basically I wanted to have a TV screen and control all my music from the big old touchscreen, iPad.
Right.
But I remember we had to do like multiple things to get it to actually work, because people, had their iPods that would plug in and run stuff, but like the iPhone wasn't really working off that, and basically the iPad was not quite meant for that. So I remember we had like a dock, but then we had to run separately from that. We had to run that would basically just charge it.
Right.
We still had to then run the HDMI for the video if we wanted to sync it with the screen.
Right.
and then we had to run the audio separately.
Yeah.
I remember then it was funny. Like a year later, I think Apple did an update or whatever for at least like the iPad or something where you could run and control all of it and have the audio going in.
Okay.
Directly from just your cable for your charging or your USB.
Yeah.
So it was kind of figuring stuff like that out that, your car stereo shops, your custom guys were working on and trying to figure out. But then, you jump, 4 years later and CarPlay is introduced.
Yeah.
Where you're basically now running everything through your phone. It's syncing to your phone. You can navigate, you can play your music, you can do whatever all through your phone.
Yeah.
And that's where we're kind of at now, where even Apple and some of the OEs are fighting each other on how much of your entire dash and system and displays are going to be managed by CarPlay versus their software.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, that's the great thing about technology, though, is that we've reached that point now. We've reached the point of where you can have a computer in your car. Again, like the thoughts of the 90s have come to light here in the 2010s. I'm sorry, the 2020s. God, look at me. I'm stuck on.
Well, and that's, what's funny is, we look back at, 84, 85 of that Terminator, from Wayne Harris, and how he had to manage so many processors, so many amplifiers, so many speakers, whatever. He had a computer, an Apple II, a green screen, play
Bad
Hangman
graphic,
and an Oregon Trail
Yep.
on there, to manage that stuff. And then now, you got your,
everything you
your
need
iPhone,
is
your
right
Android,
there. Right.
And, you can integrate this, and, what's cool too. Yeah. You got your hands free, but you could ask Siri, you can ask Google to do something, to play this song.
Right.
To do this. It's all streaming now.
Yeah.
Not through your car. Obviously they try to do Wi-Fi and OnStar stuff a little bit. Yeah. But just your phone has everyone has a phone plan. Everyone's got a phone.
Right.
You're managing all of that. Someone texts you, hey, my address is X. Come, meet me, come here at 8:00.
Yeah.
Well, now you can pull up on your screen
navigation.
Hey, this navigation or this schedule, this appointment, boom, I'm going to go there, and it'll just, pull up all your navigation, and it's going to give you traffic up to date.
Yeah.
Road hazards, even ways with the cops, on the side of the road and stuff like that. So it's just integrating your daily life, your general life into your car.
Yeah.
So that it's not just necessarily just music and entertainment, but it's managing where you're going. It's managing all of that stuff, all the functionality of your car.
And I have seen where it has changed a lot of. I look at my daughter again, and I look at the way I was brought up on. Remember every direction you're going. Remember where the sun goes. Remember what freeway you're on. Remember, so you understand directions. Mm-hmm. Where my daughter's like, I don't need to understand what directions. I have a phone. It tells me exactly where I need to go.
Yeah. No, and I'm in the kind of the middle gap of that, where like I know where things are, city, like you saying, directions, where kind of things are, but like exact streets maybe to turn on some of the stuff. Like I'd rather just, let me just run it through my phone. But then also too, it'll tell me traffic of like, and that's the thing, like if the 10 freeway was closed, and you were going somewhere, you didn't know.
Well, no, I was just going to bring up with you and I, a lot in the car, I've noticed that I'll be like, oh, just take the 10 to this, like I already know the directions.
Yeah.
But what you're using as a tool, you're saying, great, you know the directions how to get there, but I know real time. Yeah. Because I'm not thinking about the traffic, because I just go, that's the way you get there, because that's how I was brought up.
But there's an accident on the 10 freeway.
So you're like,
so it's saying it's better to go take this route. So.
Trust the directions.
Yeah.
Right? You got to trust
the GPS.
It. Yeah, you got to trust the GPS.
Well, and that's the thing too with your phone, a lot of the new, or a lot of the head units and stuff still have a GPS module on it. Whereas, you have your phone GPS. You're now like combining basically the two of those, turning your car into a GPS antenna for your phone.
Right.
Because you're attaching it to a metal surface or something like that. So you're basically getting
like you're
way
boosting.
more accurate. Yeah, you're getting way more accurate GPS on your location. Whereas I remember years before, it would think you were on a frontage road or
Yes.
it didn't know that you were on this freeway
Yeah.
or whatever. And it's now down to like, yeah, you're on this lane.
Right.
You know, you're in this
Yeah.
spot, and it, you know, judging your time of, you know, now how long will it take for me to get there based on traffic, on my speed, where I'm at, all that kind of stuff. So
it's a great tool. Honestly, it is, because you can tell somebody on the way, I'm 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
Boom. Not like, hey, I'll be there in around an hour. You know, so it's great. That's the technology's caught up.
Well, and that's the technology on everything is there, and that's obviously a lot of the OEM side or the aftermarket integrated OEM side.
Right.
You know, your classic vehicles, like we mentioned, there's stuff like the retro sounds, or even just putting your aftermarket full speaker systems in there where you can then still have CarPlay, still have a lot of those, you know, modern features. A lot of those features, the technologies, like it's kind of gotten to the point where now it's fairly standard in a lot of stuff. But you know, for several years, like if you had a base model or your, you know, I know like just an example, like the 4Runner that I have, you know, they finally got a integrated touchscreen with CarPlay, you know, 2 years ago.
Whoa.
You know, from the factory. So it was a little bit behind the times.
Right.
So, you know, upgrading some of those things. But, you know, you look at what a lot of guys like your Gary Bells, who was from the Alpine years, that then started his own shop, and now he's with, you know, Stinger.
Mm-hmm.
But him, you know, Brent Davison, who was with Alpine, but, you know, Chris Pate with MTI Mobile Toys,
Right.
Doing these elaborate, well-designed, 3D printed interiors with, you know, integrated audio that's maybe hidden away, or maybe you're just showing a little bit of the amp to show it off, but it's super nice, you know, clean system. So it's essentially like a modern car inside,
Right.
you know, but in a, you know, classic truck or classic muscle car or something.
Right.
But it's because of having all of these car audio companies, car entertainment companies that kind of developed these products, because let's be honest, like the OEMs were all with car audio. I mean, and with anything, they were always playing behind the times.
100%. Right.
You know, it was always years later when the engine got more powerful than the hot rodders were doing.
Right. Right.
You know, the car audio, the touch screens, the GPS stuff, like maybe it was in like your BMWs and your fancy stuff early on.
Right.
But it was your customizers, your aftermarket guys and your aftermarket companies that were pushing the envelope to advance this technology or integrate technology that was available into a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it's we're kind of looking at it like, oh yeah, this is like the best we've got, you know, and now it's like, well, yeah, they were probably doing that 20 years ago.
Oh, 100%.
So it's gonna keep evolving and keep growing.
I'm waiting for the part of social media to integrate with car audio. And what I mean by that is I'm looking at, like, let's say an up and coming artist that wants to be well known. Well, if he has a platform where he can play his music and someone can download him playing his live music and send him money, well, now we're talking about a different way of even talking about how music is distributed.
Well, and that's the thing. Like and I know it is still a lot of safety constraints.
Right. Right.
You know, even like settings for certain things you can't access.
Yeah. Yeah.
While you're driving, or, you know, stuff like that. Because like, yeah, you can, you know, YouTube Music or some of these platforms, Spotify, you can donate or give a gift to the artist, or they're getting, you know,
they're getting a residual from the plays
and stuff for it, and you can find new artists and different stuff like that. It is still fairly more restrictive on the car because of that, where like, you're going in car mode and you see the album art and who it is and the artist, and that's it.
Right.
You know, you can do YouTube Music, but it's just the audio. It's not playing the music video, because that's a driving distraction.
Exactly.
But if autonomous cars, autonomous driving become a lot more common and popular, you're now essentially legally kind of removing the distraction part of it for the driver.
Right.
So will that then mean that some of the companies, it would probably be the aftermarket companies first, make ways or head units and make more popular, because there are ways now, of being able to watch a movie. Yeah. Being able to watch a music video while you're listening to it, be able to do things and play games because, you sit in a Tesla, you can watch Netflix.
Right.
You can watch YouTube.
Yeah.
You can play video games.
Right.
You can't do any of that while you're driving.
No.
You've got to be parked.
Right.
But who knows if that stuff might happen in the future with more autonomous driving, and especially too, now you're talking with that, aside from your laptop or your computer, like what work functions can you do? I can pull up my calendar on my CarPlay.
Right.
I can set schedules, appointments, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, when is it going to get to the point where you're now just in a mobile office or in a mobile living room,
right,
or in a mobile, entertainment theater, basically,
right,
in your car.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the car entertainment industry is probably going, or at least going to have to integrate with.
We're also looking at things like VR, where you can even, like if you're a team driver, where you're a guy that drives, a tractor trailer, and one guy drives, one guy sleeps. A lot of those guys now are utilizing goggles to help them sleep, right? Because if you don't know, if you're going to virtual reality, you don't know where you're really at. So great, you can sleep now. You can do other things. But we're going to see more heads-up display things. We're going to see more
there's a lot of
visual stuff. That's going to come out. Obviously, Cadillac's kind of a big deal right now. I know Mercedes is really, really looking at it very hard. So we're going to see...
And even just beyond because a lot of them have now, maybe we'll tell you what speed you're going, or certain...
it'll be an entertainment system.
Yeah.
It will be. I've already heard of some people that are already working on that. And the issue I think with that is that you look at even our youngest generation right now is finding Solstice in their cars. It's the one place that no one else can access them. So there are a lot of people that take that as like, this is my decompression. This is my time, right? So you're in your cocoon.
I can listen to the music I want
to listen to. I want to watch the show I want to watch. I don't want to come home and watch the Mickey Mouse Club or whatever, right? So but that's the needs of our current people today. So with that, there's a need for it. There'll be someone that creates the technology, and we're going to grow.
Yeah. No, and that's, there's a lot of companies that have been around for, 40, 50 years, obviously even newer companies, popping up and stuff like that are thankfully constantly looking at that. There's always going to be your kind of lull and down periods of like, okay, well now OEMs have surpassed what we offered. Yeah. Okay. So well now you got to go up another level. You got to go to 11.
Yep.
Just to title back into music.
Sure.
And, you got to do that, but that's, thankfully, the technology, the money, the industry is there behind it where that can all happen the same as any other industry or tech company or anything like that.
Right.
And so then it's just about making it work with what car, you're getting into.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a big thing. As everything is more electronically and computer controlled throughout the entire car.
Yeah.
Even if it's not just the power, plant, basically.
Right.
You've got to make sure all the software communicates with each other and stuff like that. So it's like, these are now tech companies, basically.
Right.
Versus just car audio. Throw some 15-inch subwoofers from your house in the back of a Volkswagen Bug and
go beat down the block. Yeah.
So that's kind of the past early stage and the future, of the software, the technology integration, the OEM integration. And what's really cool, like we said again, thank Powerbase for helping us on this and sponsoring this. They're at both ends of the spectrum with having Rich Coe, was one of the very first guys, amongst a few people to put large sound systems, from the house and make it work in a car.
Right.
To now their OEM direct fit line, and their
power sports line,
all of that stuff that can integrate with a car or just provide all that same car audio in whatever vehicle you're in, basically.
Exactly.
So definitely a big thanks to them on this. And, I think we're just keeping the music theme with a couple episodes. So I think with, movies, music, we're going to TV next.
Oh.
So I think we're going to be looking at like some of the shows like Monster Garage, American Chopper, American Hot Rod, Rides, Pimp My Ride.
Yeah.
You know, all the way up until today with, you know, Roadkill and Motor Trend and all that stuff. So I think we're going to be diving into car TV shows next. And we've got some history with that, you know, personally. So we'll do that next.